Just used to seeing things that shouldn't be there all the time. How's that feel? Okay, yeah?
Yeah, that's good.
Sometimes it's really odd.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Okay, it's quite discreet.
That's
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, no, we're good. I mean, you can just check levels and stuff, but if there's any scratching, so I'll have a listen. Yeah, cool. Hey, Jay. All right. So it'll be to this camera.
Yeah.
No, because all of a sudden I've put two cameras in front of you.
Oh yes.
So that camera was on that side yesterday, and we didn't really use it, but we did for the whole of the morning session. We used both cameras.
Both, yeah, 'cause you had a panel.
Yeah. Good. Good.
Is that top screen going to
We'll be going live in about 5 seconds.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second day of the Commonwealth Trade and Investment Summit for 2021. And this afternoon, we have a session titled The Shape of the 21st Century Workplace, New Challenges and New Opportunities. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce the chair for this session, Dr. Joanna Newman. Dr. Newman is the Secretary General of the Association of Commonwealth Universities, which has over 500 members as part of its network from universities over 50 countries across the Commonwealth. Joanna is the first female Secretary General of the ACU, which is a wonderful achievement. The ACU is very well known, particularly in the UK, because it directs the administration of a number of scholarship programs, including Chevening, the Commonwealth and Marshall Scholarships, and the multilateral Queen Elizabeth Commonwealth Scholarships. Before joining the ACU in 2017, Joanna was Vice Principal International at King's College London, where she was instrumental in forging new international research and teaching collaborations. Joanna's previous roles include Director of the Higher Education International Unit, where she led the development of a UK-wide international education strategy, and she was also Head of Higher Education at the British Library. Joanna is a member of the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network Leadership Council. She was awarded a Parkes PhD scholarship at the University of Southampton and a postdoctoral fellowship at the Institute of Commonwealth Studies, University of London. Her most recent publication is Nearly the New World, the British West Indies and the Flight from Nazism, 1933 to 1945. In 2014, Joanna was awarded an MBE in recognition of her work promoting British higher education internationally. We're very fortunate to have Joanna leading our panel discussion today. I welcome you, Joanna, and wish you the best of luck for your discussion this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam, and thank you for an embarrassingly long and generous introduction. I'm absolutely delighted and welcome everyone for joining us for this session at the Commonwealth Trade and Investment Summit. It is a great pleasure to have been invited to chair and lead this session, and I'm pleased that CWIC and the ACU are working closely together, a partnership that can only benefit our members across the Commonwealth. As you've heard from other speakers, CTIS was developed by CWIC when the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting and Commonwealth Business Forums were postponed from last year in 2021. It was the ACU's plan as well to have a bigger presence at CBF than we've ever had before, to reinforce the really instrumental and transformative relationships between Commonwealth businesses and academic institutions. And indeed, it is CWIC and ACU's intention through our memorandum to do far more with the links between our members in the future. This summit is designed to help us focus on the priorities of Commonwealth business and government as we go into a busy year for the Commonwealth. We're in a changed world. The pandemic has fundamentally changed the working world, and all the new challenges have not yet fully emerged. Prior to COVID-19, the largest disruptions to work involved new technologies and growing trade links. COVID-19 has, for the first time, elevated the importance of the physical dimension of work. It has provided businesses with an opportunity to reinvent their working environment. And of course, the same is true for universities and for research institutions. On the one hand, we have seen the extraordinary international collaborations that have resulted in vaccines and solutions for the COVID pandemic that we've been living through. But also across our network, universities and students have suffered greatly from a lack of connectivity, from a lack of digital access. And that's something that, again, there have been fantastic innovations in the last few years, but also huge challenges, which actually, again, the link between business and academia can come together to solve. So I'm absolutely delighted to have a diverse panel here to join us for this discussion. I'd first like to welcome Dr. Mohammed Altaf, who is the board director of Lulu Group International. Lulu Group is a highly diversified conglomerate with successful business entities in strategic locations worldwide. Their portfolio includes hypermarket operations, shopping malls, manufacturing and trading of goods, hospitality assets, and real estate. As a business with a large workforce, some of whom from their retail operations are considered key workers, we look forward to hearing from Dr. Altaf on how their operations shifted due to the pandemic and what changes will stay beyond the pandemic. Welcome, Dr. Altaf. I'd also like to welcome Ian Livingstone, who's Executive Chairman of London and Regional Properties. London and Regional Properties are one of the largest real estate and leisure investment firms in the UK. His perspective on how changed and changing working habits will affect the commercial and retail property sector in our cities adds a really interesting perspective to the discussion. And finally, I'd like to welcome Dr. Paul Noon, who's the Pro-Vice Chancellor for Enterprise and Innovation at Coventry University. Dr. Noon's expertise in innovation and the relationship between academia, business and government will be invaluable as we look at how business needs to evolve to attract the best talent in this new normal, and how academia needs to track those evolving needs to keep producing the skills that businesses need from our graduates. Before I begin, I would like to remind you all that CWIC is a not-for-profit membership organisation, and they work on behalf of their members providing bespoke services. If you'd like to know more about how they can help your business, please don't hesitate to reach out to one of the team. Little bit of housekeeping. The meeting's going to start with 2-minute opening remarks from our panellists before we move on to a panel discussion. Following that panel discussion, there'll be a question and answer session. So please, can you send your questions for the panel via the chat feature, and I will then put those questions to our panellists. I'm also going to be asking our panellists for their initial presentations to last for no more than 2 minutes. But before we launch off with that, I would actually like to ask each of our panellists whether you are now speaking to us from your office or from your home environment. Paul?
So I'm actually speaking from our campus in Scarborough, so not my office, another part of the Coventry Forest, but I have spent most of my time at home over the last 18 months, so it's really nice to be back in the office.
Thank you. And Mohammed, if I may call you Mohammed.
Yeah, definitely from my office. I have 2 hyperactive twins at home, so I don't think I'll join any panel discussion home.
Okay, and Ian?
Yeah, I'm in the office too, where I have been actually for most of the pandemic. I'm quite lucky that I live a 10-minute walk away from my office, so it kind of seems sensible to go in.
Excellent. Okay, well, look, if we could now start with the first introductions from our panellists, and I'd like to start, if I may, with Dr. Altaf. Mohammed, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you for the kind introduction. So I don't think you have left me anything to say about my company. So before I think we get into any serious discussions, I would like to share some fun facts with you about my company. Last time I checked, we had close to 55,000 people working in our company, 24 nationalities, and we are arguably the largest employer of Indians outside India, Nepalese outside Nepal, and Filipinos outside Philippines. So that makes the topic of today's discussions incredibly important for me and for my company. Now, even before COVID-19, flexible working was becoming increasingly acceptable to many organizations in this part of the world. And this was driven by workforce globalization that we have witnessed here and technologies that allow us to do our jobs anytime and from anywhere. And also we had a talent shortage in this part of the world where majority of the people are actually from our expat workers. So COVID-19, just like any other business and any other geography, has accelerated this transition even for us now. And I'm delighted to be here today to what I hope would be a very interesting conversation, not just about the characteristics of the 21st century workplace, which I think we all know will be very different, but about some of the solutions for the challenges we may face. Over to the next panelist. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being so concise and brief in your opening remarks. If I may now go to Ian.
Hi, thanks for the intro. Well, our business encompasses urban regeneration, commercial real estate, hotels, and leisure. And my take on all of this, in as simply as possible, is that commercial offices definitely do have a future. They will be city centre in capital big cities, as well as regionalised. So you're seeing at the moment a government move to decentralise offices. into London and hubs, for example. There is definitely a requirement for people to outsource, particularly business processes. And I think that that can be anywhere. And it's been proven again through the lockdown in Zoom and all the rest of it, that you can have people working remotely. And I think there's huge opportunities for skilled people in the developing world to make an impression and important contribution. However, you can't export the culture of a business. You need your offices. People do need to come back to work at least 3 or 4 days a week as a minimum. If they have specific tasks to do outside, I'm happy for them to do that. And it will depend on the tasks that they're doing. But for many people, we need them back in the office. I think young people need to be trained, which means that we need trainers. I think there's a social element and a mental health element. I think productivity and creativity are not the same when people work remotely. And generally, as a business, we want to see people back, and most businesses want to see their people back. Ironically, the biggest uptake of new space in London and most of the major cities is from tech companies, not the other way around. People thought that tech companies would be the ones who decentralize. It's not happening because they are in a highly competitive environment. And if their people are not together, working together, creating and producing and working as teams, then they don't have a business advantage. So they have to be back. Millennials also live in urban environments and can commute by walking or bicycling, and therefore they don't have the long commutes. So I don't think that the commercial office is dead, but what I do think is that city centres need a lot more government thinking. We are in danger of hollowing out our city centres. We're in danger of creating social exclusion, not cohesion. I think that we need to encourage retailers, we need to encourage leisure, we need to encourage urban living. And the governments generally, where I see across the world, have not done a very good job of thinking that through. So that's my sort of 2-minute take on commercial real estate.
Thank you very much, Ian, for that. And I might come back to you and Mohammed actually in the questions just next about the mobility aspect of this and the outsourcing that you have both touched on to diverse workforces around the world and the challenge that also has for the building of cities and the climate aspects as well, which come into this, given that we're approaching COP26 in a month or so's time. If I may now turn to you, Paul, for your introductory remarks.
Thank you, Joanna. So for those that don't know, Coventry, we're a large institution, multi-campus sites in the UK. So I'm sat in our Scarborough campus, but we have campuses in London and obviously in Coventry as well, but also now in Poland and Egypt and various other places around the globe. And I remember sort of 18 months ago, one of the things I would say is, we have 35,000 customers that come to our shop every day and we have to give them a service and then we look after them as well. And of course, 18 months ago, that all changed and we weren't able to move around. We weren't able to interact as a team of academics or professional services people in the same way. We weren't able to interact with our students. So the change and the challenge that I think we faced as a university, but all universities faced, was really, it was enormous at that time. I think we've learned a lot since that moment. We've learned that there are actually some things you can do really efficiently in a home office environment. I went through I had to do nearly 200 interviews with colleagues at a time, and actually having back-to-back interviews quite quickly in a home environment where there isn't physical movement actually worked really well. Very, very tiring and very stressful, but you could actually be relatively efficient. But there's also things we've lost, and I think Ian touched on some of those as well. That sort of working as a team, creativity, I think, is almost impossible to do in this online environment. It's really difficult, and we've tried loads of tools to make it work, and they help, but they're just not the same as having those human interactions with people, and that physical connection, and we'll talk about, the water cooler moments when ideas really come to life. So we are, as an institution now, we can sort of go back to how it was. I don't think we will. I think we'll make some choices about using our space in a different way. We will use our space for those creative moments, to work with our students and work with our colleagues to be creative and create that inspiration around ideas. And we will have a hybrid setup where we use that time working in our home offices or in drop-down spaces. It's, I guess, sort of a more agile working methodology. And this is not just for the staff. This is a student thing as well. And we've continue to listen very carefully to students who want to use their time on campus, perhaps in a slightly different way to what they did in the past. And we need to make those moments rich. And as Ian said, that's really important that the city gets involved with that. We need nice places for people to go, to collect, to chat and to discuss in the city. And we work very closely with our council, who are fantastic at doing that. So I think there's it's created enormous challenges, and it feels like we've been making decisions, all of which feel bad at the time. You're trying to make the best decision to move forward. So it's been incredibly challenging. We've learned a lot. We'll go back some of it, we'll keep some of it, and we'll find a new way of working. And that collaborative approach with our students, with our staff, but also with our community, I think is going to be really important as we move forward and get the best outcome for our students and our colleagues and our communities. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And what struck me while I was listening to all three of you is that, there is we've all had to cope with adversity, and we've all found that there are some things that have actually worked incredibly well, and we never thought we would. So, for example, Ian mentioned outsourcing some functions, for example, and even the finance or HR functions, etc. But there's also, Ian, you mentioned a culture of place, if I may put place in this, the culture of the workplace, which is something that brings people together, gives people a sense of purpose. And although there have been opportunities to try to recreate that virtually, Paul, as you mentioned, that they haven't actually worked that well. But we do live in a distributed global world. We do live in a world where, as Mohammed, as you explained, you have a large international workforce where you're facilitating that work. So what is going to be the unexpected or unforeseen consequences of the shift to a sort of new normal, if I may say? We're going to have ups and downs with COVID over the next year, but if we just sort of focus rather on where we want to be in our terms of our businesses and our environments and our university campuses, having learnt from the last 2 years, what are the unforeseen consequences, do you think, of these shifts in behaviours? And I'll start, if I may, with Ian.
I think that we're going to see some decentralisation of offices. I think that there's a sort of hub and spoke thing, and I discussed a little bit earlier the fact that the government's doing regional offices now. So I think that there will be more decentralised offices that will link in to places that are well connected by rail or by infrastructure with central offices, so that people will be able to work more locally. I see that happening. We're seeing actually a rise in rents in some good out-of-town locations and some slight falls in town. So I think that's probably here to stay. I think that high streets will alter. They have to alter. They are going to shrink. 75 years ago, a high street was a butcher, a baker, and a candlestick maker, and then it grew and grew. And now it's going to shrink again, and that's just the nature of the way it is. But we have to do it in the right way, and we have to fill in those gaps responsibly with sustainable development. Offices are here to stay, but they will have to become more efficient, and I think they will have to offer we talk about socialization at work, and I think that offices can be part of that. So I think they need to have better leisure spaces and be more welcoming for people to really want to come back to and stay in and feel that they've got a leisure and social element of their work as well.
Mohammed?
In our business, in retail, the face-to-face customer interactions are a big component of the job. So for a flexible work environment with the option to work remotely or flexibility can be there, but remote working may be not an option always. And with the pandemic, many people in my industry feel that we might have lost some of the flexibility we have enjoyed even before. Because globally, if you look at retailer workers are recognized as frontline workers, we have to have more people coming to work and put more extra hours of work to keep everyone safe at home so that they can stay back, bake cakes and post their pictures in social media, but somebody had to work in the store. So the joke in our industry is that when everyone was firing people, we were aggressively hiring. And in some places, you will find that we were even reducing the age of the minimum age for the employment because we were short supply of the labor. So that was one of the problems that we faced. But at a leadership level, we are also grappling with the same problems that they have mentioned now. How to develop a sense of partnership, a team spirit, all that has become a problem for us now. And I believe at an employee level, this has become even more problematic. I don't know why we assume that no one wants to come back to workplace. With all the problems of unpredictability of work hours, the income has become volatile for a lot of people who are on part-time and on the flexible working arrangements. Also, the office environment gives you certain safety net of, there are certain safety things that happens in a workplace. You can expect certain things now. So I believe that jury is not yet out in our industry, inflexible schedule versus unpredictable schedule. I think this is a dilemma that we are dealing with right now. And also, I believe a lot of people talk about work-life balance with the work from home, but that has also become a challenge for a lot of people, how to separate your work and your home and your house and all that, life balance issues. That's my take.
Thank you. And actually, that's fascinating because if you look, there have been a number of very large-scale surveys done on what the future of the workplace will look like. And one of the things that's quite interesting is the generational differences between those that view the work-home balance as actually having improved since they've been working from home, which tends to be an older generation, and a younger generation who feels it's diminished since they've been out of the office and out of the opportunities of socialising. Paul, if I can turn to you.
Yeah, I guess if I was taking that survey, I think it's diminished. I found it very difficult to split work and home up, and not having a physical separation between the two makes it really difficult. I agree with Mohammed. I don't really know. Certainly within my team and the generality of our staff, most people want to come back to work, that they miss that physical connection. Interestingly, I think something that we haven't, I guess, mentioned is that I found, and I think our teams have found, that everything online works and works okay. Everything physical works fine as well. The blended stuff is difficult. Really difficult to have 3 people in a room and 2 people online, or vice versa. We've invested quite a lot of money to try and make that work. And I think we've got it not far off, but it's still far from ideal. So we've tried to move to either everything physical or everything online, and reduce the amount of blended meetings as much as possible. So I think somebody is disadvantaged in that. But one of the positive things is that we always had people that were distant from us. We have our teams in Singapore and Rwanda and in Dubai that were always at that disadvantage. And of course, everyone going online sort of democratized those meetings. So they were actually at the same level as everybody else in the meeting. So we don't want to lose that either. So So I think that there are a number of things where we've seen benefits, with a number of things where we don't think it quite works. And there are also things where we just know that this format is not great. And my team is moving back to the organisation, back into the office over the next, has been doing for the last couple of months, but into a new office. And we designed that office to have more of those collaborative communal spaces. So we actually, when we looked at what we would design, we changed it from what our original design was sort of 18 months ago to something that was much more about bringing people together, more collaborative spaces, walls for collaboration, those sorts of things. We made a lot of decisions about that. So it's certainly changed the way we think about things, the way we do things. Some good, some not so good.
It's very interesting because I think that must be the direction of travel for all industries and universities is how do you cope with blended working, and how do you provide an equitable experience actually to all those and make it as successful as all online or all in the office has been. I wanted to come back to a point that we touched on, you touched on earlier, which is on the distributed working being a solution to the world's sort of the emerging problem of perennial brain drain. So can you live in the developed world, for example, while working in the emerging? And does this new distributed way of working give an opportunity for those living in the developing world, working with the developed world and making the most of these virtual collaborations and connections? And that's as true for academia and links there, I think, as it is for industry and business. Maybe I could start with you, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. So I think I think you can. There's no doubt you can. We now have tools that people are comfortable with. They've improved no end. So I think you can. But that assumes that the human thing isn't really important, and I think it is. You can certainly. I think we can collaborate better because we've got better tools. But are we going to sort of stop needing to get together in a human format? I don't really see that. And of course, the risk of brain drain is that actually you can drain brains quicker in this way. It could be a negative. You can divert brains from the developing world, for instance, into the developed world easily electronically without having to move them. That's a real barrier to entry. So I think we do need to be careful that things are equitable. I think it gives us an opportunity to share knowledge more effectively, to work collaboratively across country boundaries more effectively and in a greener way. And I guess we haven't really touched on that either yet, that there are some benefits in terms of not traveling around the world. But I'm absolutely not convinced yet that the human stuff isn't really important, and we're going to keep wanting to have those human physical connections in places to do things, to interact with people, and I see no evidence that we've lost the requirement for that.
Thank you, Mohammed.
I believe some part of our jobs will be remotely outsourced, and especially because of the boom in online retail, their location has become less important than the talent available. So exactly this could happen. Some of the developing countries will be losing their brains very fast. So instead of being a shop floor or a sales representative in their home country, they can become an online personal shopper or an online customer service representative. And if the companies have a developed modern IT infrastructure, that is a very high possibility that it can be the other way around. I mean, a lot of people from developing world will be working for companies in developing world. So, and then one of the reason is online. And second thing, we should not forget that majority of the business, including retail business, has become part of the knowledge-based economy now. And it is data-driven. It employs artificial intelligence, and it has got machine learning. So that makes all that remote working and reverse brain drain a very imminent possibility, I believe.
Thank you. And Ian, I think you're on.
I'm not. I should be okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree with all that. I think what worries me a little bit about outsourcing is that once you can outsource some jobs in certain processes, and that's fine. But it's really not very far removed once you've outsourced them for those jobs to be taken over by machine learning and robotics. And if we're not careful, we'll end up in a situation where we've robotized those things, where we don't need people anymore. And that is potentially a problem in the developing world.
Well, that leads me very nicely to my last question before I open it up, which is about the skills needed for the next generation and the relationship between what business wants from universities and what universities are producing. And this session is actually called The Shape of the 21st Century Workplace. So it's not all about COVID, it's about what we want it to look like and how it's going to sort of harness that a generation that's grown up with climate being something that's one of their main concerns, for example, as well as equity and a changing focus on work-life balance perhaps as well. So if I may turn to the three of you for the last question before I open it up, what do you think the big challenges are for the next generation starting out in their careers, and what are the aspects where industry and universities can work together to make sure that they're getting the right kinds of training and skills that businesses will want and that will make them employable? I'll start with you, Ian, if I may.
That's a tricky one. For sure, we know that certain tasks can be completed by machines very easily. So I think we need to really focus on the creative aspects of improving life for everybody and how we do things which machines can't really do. So that's personal interaction, it's sitting down thinking about things, it's being creative, it's products, it's all those sorts of things. And we have to really delineate quite clearly early on which processes we think will be computerized, for want of a better word. And which ones need human interaction. So we need to be definitive, we need to train people better to do those things which are creative, that won't be taken over by machines. Go on mute.
Apologies. That goes back to the Humboldtian idea in any case of a university creating curious graduates who are able to question and make sense of their worlds. Mohammed?
Well, I think it's very hard to future-proof any skills, training or education. So this has been a problem all the time. But I still think that old-fashioned education is relevant. And maybe the education will become more flexible, more modular, or far more accessible to everyone. But no innovation is possible without a good quality education, foundation, and education fundamentals. The only thing next generation, maybe even our generation for that matter, will have to be prepared for a lifelong learning and engagement. Maybe their engagement with their universities will become a lifelong association now, unlike our time. So I think, that's how, they will have to future-proof somehow, go up, relearn, unlearn. Like they say, it's a cliched thing, but they need to go on doing that in their entire lifetime.
Thank you, Mohammed. And actually, there's a new UK government emphasis on lifelong learning and and being able to have a more modular approach and understanding that learning should go on throughout our lifetime. And indeed, at the ACU, we want that to happen across the Commonwealth countries. And Paul, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's interesting because so Ian and Mohammed have picked up on a number of areas that I would have commented on, and we're now going through a process of stretching our curriculum out beyond the end of a degree, so that there is that pathway for continual professional development, lifelong learning, as you might expect, and we're seeing a growth in also courses that support people to move from one area to another, so AI, big data, etc. and particularly to use the skills they might have in a particular area to be able to transition them into some of these new technologies. So I guess the other side of the coin is, how does industry get the most out of the skills of the young people that are popping out at the end of institutions like ours and other universities, because they have a different set of skills and they have different requirements, and etc. I think all universities work really hard to make our graduates as industry ready as possible, and we bring in people who talk to business, and we have leadership groups that look at courses to make sure they're ready. But we don't do a lot to support businesses to get the most out of the talent that is coming out of our institutions. And these young people, often young people, and not always, in the previous conversation, are incredible. They have enormous creativity. They do things in a different way. They use technology in a way that certainly when I left the university, which is not even considered. So how do we support businesses to get the most out of the talent that we're handing on to them? Because I think that's what will drive businesses going forward in the future. So I think there's a number of areas. Absolutely, lifelong learning is core to keeping up with very fast-moving technological changes that are applicable in every industry. AI, big data, robotics, all of that stuff, really, really important. And we can't just wait for graduates to come through and start filling those gaps. We need to fill them now if we're going to realise the opportunities of those technologies and not get left behind, because our competitors will do.
Thank you very much, and thank you for reminding us all what brilliant young people we have, and or people who are studying and who have thirst for knowledge. And if you think about the power of that curiosity across the Commonwealth, and the huge youth population, for example, in sub-Saharan African countries, and the potential for them through the links between education and industry. I mean, there lies the future answers to all the global challenges that we have. So I'm now opening up to the floor, and we have some very interesting questions. And the first one is for you, Mohammed. It's from, I can't actually see who the question is from, I'm afraid, but they might tell me in the chat. But the question is, as people work from home and as a result don't gather around urban areas, businesses in the areas have suffered. However, this is expected to have supported businesses in residential areas. Has this been reflected across your retail businesses?
To an extent, certainly it has helped. But a retail business always had a kind of ecosystem around them, a business that has completely disappeared. If you walk into a retail store anywhere in the UK or even any of the developed world now, you will find a coffee shop next to that. You have a keychain, somebody is repairing your things. That whole ecosystem has disappeared now. Retail business has become a business of essentials. People don't do anything by impulse. They don't go out for services. So it has adversely affected many of these businesses, and I don't see any empirical evidence to suggest that neighborhood business has really picked up on this. I don't really think so.
And of course, with the difficulties that we expect will continue over the next year or so, that pattern probably won't change.
Unfortunately.
We now have a question from Australia, and I think I want to put this to all three of our panelists. How do businesses adapt to the changing mental health needs of employees? Some will benefit hugely from home working and others will yearn for office working, as we know. How do we create the hybrid environments that serve the interests of both sets of people? Who wants to go first?
You talk about that.
Okay, Ian.
I think that going back to work in that social environment is really important, especially the young people who may be living on their own, who don't have the traditional sort of family support around them. They may be not living with their family or near their family, and I think their workplace and their work colleagues provide that sort of emotional support as well as social support.
Thank you. And of course, mental health has been a huge concern among young people within universities as well as in the workplace. Anxiety caused by many different factors, but also clearly because of the COVID factor and what people have been living through. Paul, do you want to address it from the university perspective?
Yeah, I can address it from a personal perspective. I found it very tough at times, being certainly sort of that winter lockdown felt really hard work, and not being able to get out and exercise and all that sort of thing really felt very tough. And I agree with Ian. People generally want to get back to work, although I know that there's anxiety about it. You've been working from home for a long time, then you can be a bit anxious about going back. Our experience has been that there has been a bit of that, but we've been able to support people through that, and they feel a lot better being back working with their colleagues and having some physical interaction. But I think the mental health issue is a more general issue than this. We need to look after people more carefully. People are working harder and harder, I think, or jobs are more stressful. You add in these sort of externalities like COVID, etc., that create real stresses in people's lives. I think we just need to be comfortable about talking about these things and be active about supporting people. We've done enormous amounts to support our staff and students. I think there's a lot more we can do, and having a healthy workforce and healthy customer set as well is really important. And I know we spend a lot of time thinking about how we can support our colleagues and our students more effectively with more appropriate interventions at the right time. It's really difficult to get right because people are they're not machines. They respond in different ways. But I think it is a responsibility of everybody to try and support people through these times that are difficult, and there'll be more difficult times around the corner. This isn't it, and then we'll be all right. There'll be something else in the next 6 months that will create challenges for people.
I think there has been a renewed focus on supporting mental health needs, particularly when there's been a blurring of office and home life, and it's been difficult, and there's been often experiences of isolation as well. Mohammed, how have you looked at the problem of mental health?
I think with the pandemic, one positive thing is that it kind of destigmatized the mental health issues. Now people are more open to discuss, and people accept it as a reality. So that is definitely there. But also in many cases now, the socialization was a vent for your frustrations at home. Especially if you are in a toxic relationship, if you have other problems at home, a lot of people, and there are a lot of other uncertainties that comes with the pandemic problems, unemployment, volatility. Like I said, your income levels are a problem. Schooling kids is becoming another problem. So domestic violence, I think not many people talk about it. I don't know how relevant it could be in many other places, but I think that is a very serious concern. And a lot of people think that, maybe even your spouse wants you to go back to work at some point of time, so sitting at home all the time. So I think once we open up, the only positive thing I feel about it is that once you go back to your office, if we ever go back to our normal life, we will be more sympathetic and sensitive to mental health issues. I think that's a very positive, outcome of the whole crisis.
Yes, hopefully this pandemic that we've all experienced together in a way has made us more empathetic in terms of what the workplace should feel like. I now have a question on technology. Remote working is technology-based. Most businesses have had to increase their investments on tech to maximise returns from remote working. With most Commonwealth member nations being developing countries, does the panel believe their businesses have the capacity to make these investments? And how can those countries build the necessary infrastructure to support this? And I would add to your question, which is that this is a question also for universities, of course, and governments about how they invest in universities to ensure that they can do the same thing. Can I start actually with you, Mohammed, on that question?
Very interesting question. Now we have all discussed about vaccine inequality. Like before we were discussing about income inequality, access to resources. Now it was vaccine. Now again, what is going to be is a digital divide. I mean, right now everything looks very good, but every country right now requires digital skilling is an urgent priority. It's not only about resources that you will be creating or the bandwidth that you will be increasing or other things. But there's a large workforce, definitely, but they need to understand how and when to use the necessary tools. They need to have access to the right platforms to communicate better. So otherwise, it's going to be a very frustrating experience for a lot of other places where the infrastructure is not yet robust. So I think countries need to invest in any case. Otherwise, we will be left with a very unequal world, I think worse than what we have seen previously. So a lot of these countries in the Commonwealth need to prioritize, even within the Commonwealth. It's not just the same story everywhere.
Thank you. Ian?
Yeah, I think bandwidth is not optional. And I think that it has to be a priority after sort of, food security and medicines, education and bandwidth. They are really, it's essential now that everybody, so many things are happening online, even in the developing world. Payments, we look at the use of mobile phones, we look at healthcare. All of this can really be helped massively by improving bandwidth, be that through cables or satellites or whatever it may be. But the governments in the developing world really have to focus on getting this rolled out and as quickly as possible, because it is so, so important.
And indeed, that is an area that the ACU is lobbying governments to look at the Commonwealth Education Ministers Conference when it comes, because what we found during the pandemic was that some universities were seriously disadvantaged by a lack of bandwidth. But actually, the kinds of relationships with industry can solve that. So in Ghana, for example, there were partnerships with government that funded access to data. In Fiji, local shopping centres gave students access to data when they couldn't have it at home or the university campus was closed. How do you see this issue, Paul?
Well, it's not just a developing country issue either. The digital divide here in the UK as well. But on the wider point, which is an important one, I agree. It's about people prioritising. There's also an opportunity for developing countries to miss out a developmental a technology step as well. And I spent quite a lot of time in Africa and saw that the use of mobile phones was they just gone from nothing to effectively mobile phone because it was easy to deploy. So I think there are some opportunities, and there's some areas of the Commonwealth. I know in Rwanda they've got absolutely outstanding infrastructure in terms of the net, etc. I think the other benefit is that a lot of the tools, a lot of the ways to learn how to use the tools have reduced in price and are available to everyone. I mean, the amount you can learn from YouTube and LinkedIn and courses are now available, micro-credential courses now available globally. We're seeing a reduction in cost for qualifications, especially around skills, etc. So I hope that democratizes the knowledge a bit more, and then with investments, sensible prioritization of investments in infrastructure, that will allow countries to catch up, and I know in many cases will overtake because of I think, as Joanna said, there's an enormous amount of brains out there, and if you can bring them to bear on problems, you can create incredible outcomes. And it will be our knowledge that gets us through and creates solutions to problems and creates prosperity. And there's a lot of untapped knowledge there, and if we can support that and release it, I think there's a very positive future for a lot of people.
And there's a huge amount of innovation, actually, Paul. You've reminded me, for example, in Kenya, how fintech is something which is huge. And in fact, we have graduates that we've been giving awards to at the ACU who create amazing technology that's actually on apps that you can use. So, for example, to your point, domestic violence, Mohammed, there was an app that was created by students at the University of Delhi that helped women find the nearest point to report a crime or to get help. There are apps that were created in South Africa that help farmers with early warning signs when hurricanes or other, climate-related things happen. So there's a huge amount of innovation, and what CWIC and the ACU want to do is to somehow harness that innovation, the sort of entrepreneurial spirit that can be inculcated at universities with industries who want graduates who think in that way. And I don't know if anyone's ever actually cracked that relationship well enough yet, because businesses always say what they want from universities and they're not getting, and universities quite often describe the relationship with industry where they wish that industry had more to do with what they were doing. So is there something that we can do to solve that? And then I have two more questions, and I think that will come to the end of that. So how would you improve the relationship, or what would you like to see between the relationship between industry and universities when you think about the 21st century workplace? Paul?
So it's a challenge, no doubt, and it varies. From my point of view, I think strategic relationships with industry, where we get to know each other, where they get to know the students, they engage in the ideas and we engage in their problems and challenges over a long period of time, is the best way, in my view, to get these relationships really working. We've got a very close relationship with the automotive organisation close to us. We do joint projects. We bid for projects together. We solve problems. We work with each other. We argue with each other and fall out, and something comes out of that as well. It's an adult relationship that is, but it's full of richness and benefit. And I would love loads more of those, where we really get under the skin and they get under our skin, and we really understand where we can help each other, and put that effort in just to go that extra mile to make those relationships work. Then you can do things that are, I think, really exciting, and it works for the students, works for our students, it works for our academics, but it absolutely works for the businesses. We change the way we work so that they maximize their benefit as well. You can get a win-win if you have these strategic relationships. So that's what I would like to see, far more close, long-term strategic relationships with industry.
Thank you. And Mohammed?
Well, I think there are some common challenges where I think that cooperation can be very effective, specifically with regard to things like circular economics now. The industry doesn't have the answers, and so we are looking forward. A lot of young people are quite concerned about their carbon footprint and the impact on economy. And most of the businesses today, and I can tell you this very honestly, it is no more greenwashing. It is no more a question of working for a higher purpose or anything like that, or to make your company's policy look attractive to other people. But there is a serious challenge that we face now, even in terms of food security, supply chain security. Climate change has become a very major challenge. So I think that is where we will look at more partnership with the universities, because we need to come up with some innovative solutions together. We have to come out of this together, I think.
Thank you. And Ian?
I agree with both of my colleagues there. And I think that particularly where there are practical courses, there needs to be an engagement. There absolutely has to be, and it's a win-win without any doubt. I think the problem is that in some universities and with some university staff, there is still an academic snobism and an unwillingness to engage with profit, for want of a better description. And that's just got to go, because this is a win-win. This is not about us being better than somebody else in academia or in business. It's not relevant anymore, that. I think we really need to be practical and engage with business so that we get the right outcomes for the students and for the businesses.
Thank you. And we just have time, I think, for one final question. I think we've answered the question on skills. So that's about, it's an interesting one about how you judge soft skills. So line managers are in remote working. There's a digital footprint of the work completed and the quality of the work, which is actually also true to say about online student activity. Line managers are believed to be finding it difficult to judge soft skills. How can this challenge be overcome? So quick responses from each of you, please. Who wants to go first?
Well, I will go first. I think, yes, this has become a major challenge. Also, because a lot of this work is now flexible, soft skills are now becoming a core competency now. Whereas other technical skills are now threshold abilities now. You can get a job, but if you want to succeed, especially when a lot of this work is distributed now, you need empathy, you need a lot of understanding of each other's, you need a lot of creativity, problem solving. So I think that is another area where we require a lot of emphasis and training.
I know that the ACU has done a lot of work on trying to create cultural environments where you can actually meet each other. Students can meet virtually for summer schools when they couldn't meet in person, and some things work really well and other things still can't just match the kind of ability to work with someone in a room. Paul?
It's a great question, because I think the answer is we're not very good at it, and it's really difficult to do in a non-physical way, because a lot of those things that Mohammed spoke about are really demonstrated in a physical environment. I think I'm afraid I'm giving you a rubbish answer because I don't know the answer to it. I think you have to try and bring people together. We've used loads of tools. I promise you, I've been through the whole box of tricks to try and support these sorts of things, and some of them are okay, but none of them are as good as having people in a room or, around a whiteboard or with a load of post-it notes, I'm afraid.
I have to challenge you on this, because if you think about MOOCs and if you think about the power of online engagement for people who can't travel in and do a 3-year degree or even a 1-year degree, and actually you think, for example, doing a seminar with students online, I found that I actually could get more engagement from them than I could in a classroom where most of them don't want to speak. So I have to say that there are alternative views to that, but the question was about soft skills. So
I guess it's measuring them and that sort of thing which is where I absolutely agree with you that there are some, social learning, engaging people in conversations. Actually, an online place is a good place to do it. It feels safer. It's easier to do it, especially if you're dealing with really complex and difficult, challenging subjects. Absolutely, online can produce a lot. But how you measure empathy, make it work in a group online, it's just quite difficult, and it needs to be really carefully managed. I think those sorts of things, I guess I'm talking about. But
it's difficult to do, but we're starting to look now at virtual reality tools for our hospitality businesses, where you can actually role play and you can practice and learn, and it can score you on your soft skills. And that is definitely something that's coming, because it's very hard to test people in that environment without having some sort of program to do it. So I think the tools are developing. They're not here yet, that's for sure. And right now, as Paul and Mohammed have said, I think we need people to be engaged physically as much as possible. And until then, we've got to just do our best. But these things have definitely got merit, and you can standardize your training. You can test people you can test people, and you can monitor it and assess them very accurately with these with VR tools and machine learning. So it is here. It's not great yet, but it's not that far away either.
Well, on that positive note, I want to thank all three panellists for being absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed talking with you all and learnt a lot. And I'd also like to thank our audience for the great questions and to thank CWIC for hosting us today. We're now moving to a quick turnaround to the next session, which is Gaps and Gains on the Road to Equality, showcasing exceptional women leaders and preparing the next generation. This is in 15 minutes, and you'll hear from Shalom Lloyd, founder and CEO of Naturally Tribal, Falon Runcho Alachia, Vice Chairman of FEMFA Oil, Dame Martina Milburn, Group Chief Executive of the Prince's Trust Group, Amanda Pullinger, CEO of 100 Women in Finance, and Enitan Solarin, Managing Director of YOA Insurance Brokers. But with that, I'd just like to thank our panellists again.
Thank you very much.
It was wonderful, Paul.
That was fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
We hope to see you all physically.
Yeah,
Exactly. Bye.
Bye.